property is still going to impose the setbacks. This is why I need to see setbacks, so that we can make sure that the numbers are right and they don't get to development and then we have an argument over what the setback should be. So I do need that. And then I have guidance as to what the typical setbacks for that zone are. And then if you move on to it's my page 7, but it's page 17 in your packet, you'll see that I'm still looking for a note that says bicycle safe grates on the inlet box, and making sure that they show proof of water rights documentation transferred to the Public Works Department per our city code. Finally, there's just a weird note on sheet C102 under note 14 where it says all improvements in the public right-of-way shall be installed per Moab city minimum standards. Clearly, we're not in Moab, so they'll need to address that and change that to Riverdale. Moving on to Mr. Douglas's comments, you can see he's only got 4 comments. Long-term drainage system operation and maintenance plan, BMP's approved in accord with plat, which is we see it every time. Notice of intent filed with state. Again, that's tied to the stormwater retention tank in the asphalt, so they'll need to do that. Note certify retention pond size and elevation after construction, and then again a typical note we always see requiring all missing non-functioning or damaged surface improvements to be replaced. Police department has no concerns noted. Fire department has no issues. Moving on, the engineering department, there's quite a few issues. I feel like in order to move the work session along and not be overly redundant, I'll just go over those more detail in front of the developers so they can see it. But they do have a copy of this report and they're aware of it. So we'll go over that in more detail in the main meeting at 6:30. Moving on to, you can see their application is in the packet, their payment. You'll see an engineer response letter from their engineer to our engineer, which helped our engineer greatly reduce the number of comments. This original report, which you haven't seen because we shut down and even moved forward with the meeting with planning commission because there were so many review comments, but I think the initial report was like 7 pages. So we're moving in the right direction. We cut it in half for the purposes of this meeting. But you'll see review comments there addressing all of those questions from the applicant or from the engineer, our engineer, and the applicant responding back to our engineer. Following that, there's some elevation drawings that are kind of preliminary concepts of what the coloration and the materials might look like, and even where it kind of sits. On page 32 in your pack, you can see kind of where it would sit on the site relative to all the other buildings in the parking field. Then you have the drawing packets in there. They're quite extensive. This developer did provide a lot of information, so we're just trying to make sure it's all correct now, mostly for the engineering purposes, but you'll see following the construction designs, you'll start to see landscaping detail, and then following landscaping detail, you're going to start to see some of the architectural detail for the project. So they did provide quite a bit of documentation for us to look at. So if you have questions or you want to review something, maybe just note the page. They even provided us with a typical floor plan layout of what the units would look like inside the building, so that was helpful. Following that, the conditional use permit, and again, conditional use permit, there's a few items in city code. Maybe what I'll do, just for everybody's sake, in the main meeting is I'll review those quick criteria for the conditional use permit since we're moving on to kind of item B. Just so that all planning commissioners know, a refresher for those of you that are familiar and some of you maybe haven't done it as much, you'll be able to kind of hear what those conditions are that we typically check. And if all the conditions we list in our conditional use permit code seem to be met or there's no concerns, then there's no reason we couldn't go forward with issuing the conditional use permit. Now remember, the conditional use permit, your hat changes. You are an approving body for the conditional use permit itself. So you're going from a recommendation body to a legislative approval body for that conditional use permit approval. So be sure you note that. Moving on from that, you'll see the application fee paid, and that's pretty much in a nutshell that whole application at this point. So I would defer to any of you planning commissioners who may have questions for me. Mr. Lemon's representing the applicant and will join us at 6:30. He does have access to this meeting, so thank you.
So Mike, I just have a question. These are going to be over to where the existing ones are and they're just building more?
That's correct. These will be built on the south perimeter right next to the RDA property. So there's a fence currently there. there's an area of it that's really undeveloped. It sits there, it's just grass and parking. They're going to put that right there, and that will be the 40 units.
Okay.
I think they're going, if I remember right, they're going 3 stories, but it's going to be one contained building, if I remember right. And that's how they'll capture all 40 units.
Wow.
Now, most of those units were going to be, it looked like there were a few 2-bedroom,
Yeah.
mostly 1-bedroom. But for the 40 units, from what I could see of the site plan, is there sufficient parking that's been allocated for that?
It's exactly meeting the criteria of city code right on the number. In other words, they've made sure to refine exactly, and I told them to check and double check that and triple check that so that it's right, and the numbers reflect they have exactly as many parking stalls as is the requirement for stalls per unit in their development.
So what is the requirement for that?
One,
What is it?
1 3/4 stalls per every unit, every apartment
Okay.
unit. Yeah.
My question is there only one way into these apartments and one way out?
No, so there'll be 2 access points. You can come in their existing driveway in, and then where that currently sits, that kind of home garage building, they're going to remove that and put in a double drive, like another driveway there with 2-way traffic in and out. So there'll be 2 points of access.
Because I could only see one way in, and I thought, for that many people, we need more than one access.
No, there'll be 2. They're going to design another entrance point.
But that access is not going to allow a left-hand turn exiting
Yeah, because of the island.
because of the island.
Yeah.
Okay, so they will all have to go north, right?
They'll have to turn right and go up 300 up towards the turrets.
Is that both of them or just the one?
Just the
one,
second.
right?
The one that's deeper to the east will be right in, right out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the old apartments, I know some of them are kind of run down. Are they redoing all those too, or have they already?
Yes. So the old developer got to building C and D, maybe a little bit of E in renovations, and then they stopped because they weren't willing to comply with some of the things that our building official was requiring of them to meet code. So they kind of just stopped. That's kind of where the project on that end died. This new owner who's bought it is going to go in and actually make those improvements and do what's required by code to make those improvements. The answer is yes. This owner is wanting to be more responsible and continue the effort in a more responsible fashion than the last owner.
So as I recall, there was kind of a 1940s style home right there on the bend.
Yep.
They're going to remove that and do the additional development
Yes.
with the pool and the...
Yep. And where that home sits, for the most part, is where the new driveway access will come in. Yeah, it'll
Okay.
take it out. Yeah.
Maybe this is a dumb question, but hasn't this area kind of been known as a problem with the police? Or is it not?
Well, so Wanda, you weren't on the planning commission when this happened, but back when this came in 2017, some of the planning commissioners currently with us declared this commission. That developer sold to us that they were going to do rent control to raise rates to bring in more desirable tenants to the center. They did do some of that. So I think some of those really undesirable tenants have been relocated, but we have to be real careful, obviously, what we say, because they're still people and they have a right to live in Riverdale. But from time to time, this area does have a little bit higher crime per capita. I think more recently it's not as bad as it has been historically, but it's quite a few units and a higher population all in one place. So if you took a representative population and spread it out, is it an enormous amount of crime that's localized? I don't know.
I know the police department had no comment. Is that the reason?
Hey, this isn't related to that, but people need to shut off their mics when they're not talking because I'm getting back feed and I can't hear half of what you're saying.
Mike, I know that we are required as a city to have a certain amount of affordable housing. Is this considered affordable housing?
It I think it's 800 or 850. If the rent's around 800 to 850, it would qualify as median income.
One other question. I know that the plan is to on the south side of that property to have that road come through. Will this be attached to that road when it does go through? Is that the plan, or is that not the plan?
No. So the RDA project will be its own contiguous area, but what we are requesting in this project is sidewalk connectivity between their project and what the RDA is trying to do in the future. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll see the sidewalk reflected in the site plan, but in the future, that's the goal when our project starts to go forward, that they come back in and create some walkable connectivity to what we were trying to do with the commercial area right next door.
Hey, and that old request with the previous contractor, he talked about these possibly being owner occupied. Is that plan off the table now, or is it just going to be rentals?
Yeah, I would never see these as being owner occupied. These are clearly, these are rental properties. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any other discussion? Any discretionary items?
Oh, I have one more agenda item.
You do? Okay.
Yeah. So this is the one that I wanted to have during the land hurricane. The date of the land hurricane. So in case you don't know, Utah now has hurricanes too. So just chalk that up to the natural disasters we can have. But anyway, yeah, so I have on there consideration to set a public hearing for proposed amendments to Title 10 of Riverdale City Code, specifically chapters 13D, 14, 16, 21, 25, and 28. I wanted, for the purposes of the work session, just briefly go over the reasoning behind each one of those. A lot of times we, as you probably know in city government, it's a lot easier when we bring forward a lot of code changes at once, try to do some housekeeping and get them done, 4 or 5 at a time if we can. That's what I'm doing. This is a lot of it housekeeping with a little bit of forward-thinking ideas on a few issues. So the first one is a super easy one. This is more just to make it easier for Shaylee when she goes and does an update with our code company. This has been a lingering issue that for 7 years I should have addressed. It's bothered me since day one starting here. And that is the designation of low-impact transition overlay zone. In my book, there's a line through CL. It says LIT, but on every other actual official record of the city, it still shows a C-L. And I don't know if that was for an old designation that never got changed or what. So it should be LIT. That's what we recognize it as. So that's an easy change that I'm suggesting we make here. In Title 10, Chapter 14, there's a statement, and it says, all accessory buildings may only be built to include no more than 1 story, with an exception for the addition of a mezzanine level in accessory buildings. This is a request from our building official. There's been a suggestion here from him to only allow accessory buildings to be 1 story in height to halt the potential modification of that building into an above garage per apartment or rental unit, especially in zones where it's not prohibited, but even outside of that. Right now, the code's it's ambiguous. And so because it's ambiguous, if they can meet the requirements, they've been able to go and build an upstairs level, and they'll call it like storage, but once it's been building permitted, an owner can go in and amend it, do whatever they want, and turn it into a living space without our knowledge, and then it's harder for us to cure it once it's on that end. So his request is make it clear in the code so when an accessory building is built, that's not an option. I mean, you can't really turn a mezzanine into a living space, So that's what that one's about, Title 10, Chapter 14. Title 10, Chapter 16 is a sign change, and is there a question?
One question on that.